Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be going over how to add in-app purchases to your app, and specifically how to add subscriptions to your app. And we're going to see if we can do this in less than 50 lines of code. If you're ready to get started, then stay tuned. Let's learn together. All right, now here we are in our brand new Xcode project. And before we get started writing any code, the first thing that we want to do is we want to go over to our app in the project navigator here. And we want to choose the target file and signing capabilities, and we want to add a new capability, and that new capability is going to be adding in-app purchase to our signing capabilities list. So once we've got that in our project, automatically managed signing should handle everything we need, and from there we are ready to move on to our next step. So that first step was really easy. The next step is only slightly more complicated. It's not bad. So we'll click back over into our project navigator file, and we'll press Command N to create a new file. And the file that we want to create is a StoreKit configuration file. So if we just search for store over here in our filter, then we can choose that StoreKit configuration file. And we can give this one a name. I'm going to name mine local config because I'm not syncing this with the App Store. So you may notice that our checkbox here is not synced, and this box says sync this file with an app in App Store Connect. Now we're not going to be doing that today, just because I don't have any products in the store for this particular app. So when you uncheck this box, it creates a local copy that you can use for prototyping, and you can even use it for testing when you've got your local config set up in this way, which is really cool. You can actually check this box here, and it will pull down those purchases and sync them locally to your Xcode project, which is really cool. And if that's the case, I wouldn't call this local config. I may call this something else like StoreKit config in that scenario. But again, since we're just working on a demo project here, we're going to call this local config, and then we're going to press next. And we will just save it in the default project setting, project location there. Great. And now, as you can see, it says that we need to click the plus button to add an in-app purchase or subscription. So if you are familiar with the various types of purchases that you can do inside of StoreKit, you can do consumables, non-consumables, non-renewing subscriptions, and auto-renewing subscriptions. Now, each of those have their own type, but for our video, again, we're going to focus on adding subscriptions specifically. However, it is a very similar process to adding the non-consumable and consumable in-app purchases to your app. So let's go ahead and let's click on the Add Auto-Renewable Subscription. And we don't have any groups here, so the first step it wants us to do is to create a group. So let's call our group Subscriptions, and we'll click Next. Nice, okay, now we've created a group. And when we create this group, the first thing that we want to do is we want to add a particular product to our group. So the product that we want to add, let's say, is our monthly subscription. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to give this a product ID. Now this product ID needs to be unique. Typically what you want to do is you want to follow reverse domain name notation, similar to the way that you would whenever you're signing the bundle ID for your app. So since I own jpmtech.io, my product ID is going to be called io.jpmtech. And then this would be the name of whatever your product is. So I will call this monthly subscription. There we go. And then we'll click Done. Nice. And now we've got our first product set up to run locally. And as you can see, we've got the price set to $99 for 1 month. And we can turn family sharing offer on for this product, which is really cool. So we can also come down here and we can set up a display name. So let's go ahead and set up a display name for our localization, and we will call this our monthly subscription. And the description that we want to give this, let's just make something up. How about get the best products on a month-to-month basis. There we go. And then we'll save that. Nice. And so that is our first subscription setup done. So let's go ahead and let's just add one more. And we'll add another auto-renewable subscription here. and I want to put it in the subscriptions group, and then we'll click next. And this is where we again define what our product is going to be. So our reference name, let's call this our annual subscription. And for our product ID, again, we're going to do our reverse domain name. So for me, it's io.jpmtech. And then we will call this annual subscription, just like that. Cool. And then we'll press done. And since this is an annual subscription, we'll change this to 1 year. And we will make this a whopping $10.99 for the 1 year. Very cool. And then one last step before we move on is we want to add our display information. So we will call this our annual subscription. And for our description, we'll just give it something generic here. We'll say get the best products for the best price. There we go. Now, for yours in a real project, you would want to make that something actually descriptive, but again, this is just a demo product to understand StoreKit 2, so we'll be keeping that description fairly generic. So now that we've got our subscription set up, you can see we have a subscription group, and we'll just click save anyway there. So we've got a subscription group, and it's got 2 products inside, a annual subscription and a monthly subscription. And with that, we are actually ready to go ahead and start writing some code to display the products. Now, the first thing we want to go ahead and do is we want to go ahead and import StoreKit. So StoreKit gives you access to several of the UI components that are already set up and ready to go on our behalf. And it looks like we've got some random failures over here, so let's just refresh our view. Maybe try leaving that view and coming back. Cool, now it's happy. All right, so the first thing that we want to do is I would like to make this somewhat similar to a real app. So let's go ahead and let's create a button. And inside our button, we will call this button subscriptions. And when we click this button, I would like it to actually launch a sheet that shows all of our available subscriptions. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and just create a view model up here. And we'll create an @observable view model. And this will be a class, and we will call this Store Manager. And inside of our Store Manager, we will have a is showing subscriptions. And we will set that to false by default. Great. And then in our code down here, our view code, we can say @state var view model equals store manager, just like that. All right, and so inside of our button, we will tell it to toggle the is showing subscriptions sheet. So we don't have the sheet modifier added just yet, so let's go ahead and do that. So we will say that we want a sheet, and we want it to be presented when our view model is showing subscriptions is toggled here. And then for our content, this is again where we're going to do our first StoreKit view. So we will create a subscription. Helps if you spell it right. A subscription store view. And this subscription store view will take a group ID. Now, you may be asking, where do we get this group ID from? So inside of our local config, whenever we were checking out our subscriptions up top here, our subscription group, we can see that we have our group ID here, and that group ID is 827BFD9D. So let's go back into our view, and let's place that here, 827BFD9D, just like that. Cool. And then we should be able to click the button on our preview and actually see our subscriptions showing up. So let's try that out. We're loading subscriptions. Oh, the subscriptions are unavailable. Now, you might be saying, if you're like me, oh no, what happened? Well, there is one step that I forgot to do, and that is to update our scheme to actually use our local StoreKit configuration. So in order to do that, we come up here to our scheme editor, and we choose Edit Scheme. And then in the Run section, we can scroll down here and we see StoreKit configuration is currently set to none. Let's change that and let's let it use the local config.storekit. Very cool. All right, and so now we will close that here. All right, and now if we redo our preview. Nice, and so with that little bit of code, we've actually got our subscriptions up and running. As you can see, our annual subscription is $10.99 per year, and our monthly subscription is 99 cents, which is exactly what we had set up. Very cool. Now, you may be noticing that this looks a little plain and that we're missing an icon here. Now, if we wanted to, we could go back into our config and we could actually set up various icons. So if we scroll down here, we can see that we can choose various images for these types of subscriptions here. But we're not gonna worry with that right this second. Again, we're just gonna stick with a basic demo so that we understand the basics of how StoreKit works and what StoreKit does and how to add these subscriptions to our app. Now, you may be wondering, how do we know when they've actually purchased a subscription, and how do we actually update our UI so that when they have purchased a subscription, we're not showing a paywall or we're not asking for more funds? So how do we do that kind of thing? So let's start by adding a very simple parameter to our view model, and we will call this purchased subscriptions. And this purchased subscriptions will be a set of string. Yep, exactly right. So that purchase of subscriptions will be a set of strings. Now, you may be wondering, okay, well, if we're using Apple's UI here, how do we get what is purchased through Apple's UI into our own view model, and how do we get it into our own sets so that we can work with it and do things with it? That is where a new modifier from SwiftUI comes in called in-app purchase completion. Now, as you can see, this takes several different parameters, so let's go ahead and hit enter on those. Now, as you can see here, our first parameter is our product, so let's just go ahead and call this product. And our second parameter is a purchase result. So that purchase result, as we can see here, is actually a result type. So it could be a purchase result or it could be an error. So let's go ahead and let's call this, helps if you spell it right, purchase result. Very cool. All right, and then from there, we are actually ready to start writing the code to handle the purchase from the built-in UI. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to do a guard statement, and we're going to check the case where we get a success, and we are going to let our verification result, and we're going to let that equal our purchase result here. And then we're going to do one more guard statement, or excuse me, one more case statement, and that case statement is going to check whether or not we have gotten a successful verification. So we will say, and we don't actually care what this parameter is here, but we will say that our success is we will be success if we have our verification result here, and then if something goes wrong. So right now in this guard statement, I don't necessarily want to handle what goes wrong, but this right here is exactly where you would do that. So let's just go ahead and let's say that this is your to do. So handle errors here. And so here is exactly where we're going to handle any errors that may come through, whether that be because the purchase couldn't be verified or whether the purchasing of the item actually failed itself. Now, those are the two things that Apple wants us to make sure of, that both the purchase went through and that the receipt has been verified. So that's the two cases that we're going through here. And so if both of those have succeeded, that means that we're ready to officially purchase our product. So we can come here and we can say that we want to access our view model, and then we want to get our purchase subscriptions, and we want to insert our product, not fully product identifier, but our product.id. So that is the unique ID that goes with the purchase that we set up inside of our local config earlier. So if everything worked, then we want to add that to our purchase subscriptions value here. And then because that was successful, we are good to go ahead and toggle our sheet back out of the way since the user has purchased them. Now that we've been able to actually go through purchasing those products, we need a way to actually display that in the UI so that we can either hide the paywall or allow the user to access the various premium features. So one way we can go ahead and do that, even with this simple demo app, so that we can kind of grasp better what's going on inside of StoreKit, is we could just display a list. So we can display a list, and we will create an array out of our viewModel.purchase subscriptions, and we will say that these items are in themselves unique. So we will use the ID of \self, and we will take those items here. Actually, we don't actually need those items. So then we will display a text with the product ID inside of those items. Nice. Now, running this in the simulator can be a little bit tricky because we don't want to actually save any or store any state to that local device. So let's go ahead and run this on a full simulator. Great. And so now we can click on our subscription, and we will be fetching them from the store. Cool. And let's say that we want to sign the user up for an annual subscription. Yeah, that sounds great. Let's sign them up for an annual subscription. Now, because we're doing this locally and it's not connected to the App Store, it is completely safe. It won't actually charge you anything, as long as that box on the StoreKit config remained unchecked when you created it. So we'll go ahead and hit subscribe. Cool. It says your purchase was successful. We are all set. So now it pulled our display out of the way, and we can see that we have our annual subscription. And then from inside of here, we can actually do whatever we need to do, such as hide the paywall, access the gems, whatever the thing is, so that our users of our apps can actually access their premium content that they paid for. Now let's go back and check on our line count here. So one thing we want to do is we can just go ahead and remove these comments just to make the line count just a little bit easier. Nice. And as you can see, even with the preview, we are at less than 50 lines of code. Now this is pretty good. This is enough that we can actually understand a little bit about what's going on with StoreKit, but it's not an entire and complete understanding of everything that you can do inside of StoreKit. StoreKit 2 has so much stuff going on with it that it is actually really a really complicated process. For example, we are going through an in-app purchase completion here in our app, but this in-app purchase completion could have happened on a family member app. It could have happened on a child's app, and then it would have asked the parent for permission. And we're not handling any of those cases. We're not doing the logic that is necessary to actually go and update our app anytime something happens in the background, or anytime that Apple updates the store to say, hey, now this user has access to this thing, whatever the thing is that they purchased. So there are several cases that aren't covered here, but I wanted to be able to help you have a basic understanding of some of the things that you can do to add StoreKit to your app. For example, another way that we could improve our code here is, instead of hard coding this group ID as a string inside of our app, this would be better served somewhere outside of our app, probably on a server, so that it could fetch the latest data, or if this ever changed, we could automatically update the products in our app without having to send out an update. Similar with this purchase subscription set here, it would be better for that kind of thing to live somewhere else on a server, so that we had one source of truth rather than let it living here, because if it lives here in your code, every time you relaunch the app, we're going to be resetting this back to an empty array, and we're not doing anything right now to actually fetch the products that the user has already purchased. Now, as I said earlier, StoreKit is a really big, really complicated beast of an API. So if you're interested in more StoreKit content or more StoreKit 2 content, then please feel free to let me know in the comments. I'll also be checking out RevenueCat here in the very near future, because I want to see how that wrapper compares to what Apple gives us by default, and see how much easier it is. And with that, feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And if you leave a comment, just be nice about it. That's all I ask. Thanks. Have a great day.